You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and happy Memorial Day weekend to you. I hope you're coming off of a relaxing time, spent however you needed to spend it to give it a quick recharge as we head into summer. This week, I will be talking about, obviously, Real Salt Lake. That game was a heart attack. I'll go over it here in a second, but holy moly. I'll also talk about a recent report that came out about the Jazz rebuffing a trade during the trade deadline, which both surprised me and also confirmed a few things that I've been saying for a while. And then I'll also be talking about Kevin Young, the new head coach for BYU men's basketball, and a couple of big recruiting gets that he got this last month, and how the program is actually starting to trend upwards after everyone thought it was free fall chaos when Mark Pope left. As always, please do follow me on the socials. That is at the Matt Cave Pod on X, and then you can search out the Matt Cave Podcast on Facebook. I also have a YouTube channel where this show has been uploaded and will continue to be uploaded to. Just search the Matt Cave Podcast on YouTube, and you'll find my little YouTube channel. Has a couple of playthroughs on it, some other videos, and obviously this fine podcast. So please like and subscribe there, and give me 5 stars, rate, review wherever you listen, however you listen. I greatly appreciate it, and let's get as many spelunkers in here as possible, huh? I want to do this for a living. All right, so let's start with Real Salt Lake. So this one, I was expecting to be a pretty easy one for the Cobalt and Claret there. It was anything but. And it seems like Real Salt Lake has historically always had a rough time heading to Dallas for games. I don't know what it is, whether it's Austin FC, the Houston Dynamo, or FC Dallas. Real Salt Lake just struggles with these teams. And so, while I was thinking it was going to be an easy game, the FC Dallas did not want it to be. And Real Salt Lake went down 3-0. And honestly, for 2 weeks now, 2 weeks running, Zach McMath has had what they call in soccer or football howlers. Just boneheaded mistakes that have led to goals that can be directly attributed to him. This first one was an own goal, where it was for a professional goalie. Now, I'm not saying I could make this save, but for a professional goalie, the ball's coming straight at you, and you have both your hands ready for it. You got to catch that. And it looked like as the ball was coming at him, he didn't know if he wanted to punch the ball away or catch it. And so it looked like one hand was a fist, the other hand was ready to catch, and then at the last second, he tried to switch. And the ball just went through his hands and into the goal. 1-0 FC Dallas. The second one, he was up near midfield, and he miskicked a ball. And there was an FC Dallas player charging at him, Patrickson Delgado, who got the ball, scooted on past the goalie, because goalies aren't fast, and scored an easy one. So that was easily 2 goals directly attributed to Zach McMath. And earlier this season, I was kind of singing his praises, but now you're either the hero or the GOAT, and I don't mean greatest of all time. So there's something that needs to be done here, either with coaching or maybe giving him a couple of games off just to rest, reset his brain, and get back into things. But wowie zowie, that was embarrassing. The last one, that was an actual goal. The last one he allowed in, that was an actual goal. It was deflected off of the defender, and it just went by him. So last one, I don't blame him. Or the first 2, absolutely 100% were his fault. So Real Salt Lake down 3-0. I talked about this last week. Historically, that's bad news. That's usually game over, historically. 2 minutes after Paul Arriola scored the goal for FC Dallas, Diego Luna received a fine through ball. I believe it was from Anderson Julio, but I could be wrong, and put it away. And so it was, all right, 3-1. Maybe there's some magic here. Then Anderson Julio scored quite possibly one of the prettiest goals I think I've seen from Real Salt Lake this year, where he just hit it into the top left corner of the goal outside the 16-yard box, and it was just a thing of beauty. The commentator for Apple TV said if there were 8 goalies in goal, none of them would have been able to save it. Now, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you can kind of tell how impressive the goal was. That was incredible. And then at the death, 98 minutes, there was 8 minutes of stoppage time. Nelson Palacio receives a pass from Christian Arango, from Chicho, and passes it into the net. It got a little help going through. Like in hockey, took a little deflection. And Real Salt Lake saves a point away at FC Dallas. When it was 3-0 at 60 minutes. That's 2/3 of the game gone. And Real Salt Lake scored 3 goals in 38 minutes. Crazy. Now, Real Salt Lake has 8 wins, 2 losses, 5 draws. They have not lost, get this, since March 9th. Yeah. Real Salt Lake has not lost a game in MLS. They obviously lost in the U.S. Open Cup, but that's a different competition. And they shouldn't have lost that one, but good job, New Mexico, I guess. But March 9th, that's the longest unbeaten run in MLS. Even Inter Miami has lost a game in that time frame. So what do the standings look like for Real Salt Lake? Well, they're still top of the table in the West. They're 4 points clear of Minnesota United. They still have the second best goal differential. Obviously, it doesn't change when you draw, but they have the second best goal differential in MLS, only behind the absurdly stacked Inter Miami. Even without Lionel Messi, they're still absurdly stacked. This is incredible. And I went over, if you want to hear it for last week's episode, I kind of went over the salaries and how it all works. But just to remind you, Real Salt Lake is third from the bottom in terms of money spent on their roster. Lionel Messi, on his own, almost makes more than the entirety of the Real Salt Lake Football Club. And yet they're in first place in the West. 4 points behind FC Cincinnati, 5 points behind Inter Miami for best overall in MLS. This is amazing. This is uncharted territory, and this is fun. So definitely go out and support these boys if you can. Make America First Field really loud, and let's see if we can't do something special this year. This team offensively, once they get the ball moving, they are like lightning. They are so fast. They get the ball down the pitch with incredible pace. And with Chicho Arango, there's actually a direction now for that ball to go. Whereas in the past, you had Diego Luna, you had Anderson Julio, you had Nelson Palacios just kind of sprinting down there, and then nobody knew what to do. Now they have somebody who knows what to do. And now we're reaping, us as fans of Real Salt Lake are reaping the benefits of this amazing club that Pablo Mastroeni and crew have created. Now, with the summer transfer window opening up in July, I would love to see Real Salt Lake go and get another midfielder and possibly a goalie, especially with these last 2 games from Zach McMath. But other than that, just depth across the team, just in case an injury happens. Knock on wood. But overall, this squad is very good. Just defense needs a little work. And by a little work, I mean a lot. Outside of like Justin Glad and maybe Andrew Brody, the defense needs some work. So there is still a lot to be done for this team. It's by no means a perfect roster, but man, is it fun. Next game up for Real Salt Lake is the Seattle Sounders on Wednesday, if you're listening to this before Wednesday, but it's May 29th, and that's always a fun one against Seattle because there's a lot of connection there. Freddie Juarez, the former coach of Real Salt Lake, went to Seattle to become an assistant coach, and then Albert Rusnak, the former captain of Real Salt Lake, went to Seattle as well, thinking that was greener pastures when, oops, guess what? It's not. So it's a fun rivalry there as well. All right, so let's move it along to the NBA and a report that came out from KSL Sports' Ben Anderson. So local paper, local news. picked up by the major outlets, not picked up by ESPN, but it was picked up by The Athletic as well as Bleacher Report. And apparently, during the trade deadline, the Jazz and the Hawks were in light conversations about a trade. What that trade would have been, whether it was Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, other things, draft capital, who knows. But according to Ben Anderson, he said on the Jazz Notes podcast, quote, "I will tell you that there was some talk about DeJounte Murray to the Jazz at the trade deadline, and it was going to cost the Jazz Keyonte George, and the Jazz said no." Obviously, DeJounte Murray tweeted out, "You can't believe everything you read on the internet. I agree." And that's a pretty ridiculous thing to report if it's not true. Because DeJounte Murray is one of the best players for the Hawks, and I do not think that they would have dangled him for just Keyonte George and maybe some draft assets. I just don't see that as a thing. And then I also don't see the Jazz even allowing Keyonte George's name to be floated in a trade conversation because he is that integral to what's going on for the Jazz. He was second team all-rookie, and the only reason he wasn't first team is because this is one of the best rookie classes in recent memory. Now, that being said, I am sure that the Hawks are on the phones constantly seeing what they can do, trying to find a direction for their team. Head coach Quinn Snyder, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, they've got talented pieces, but nothing that really gels together. So this offseason for them is going to be very interesting. But the Jazz, even Lauri Markkanen is available for an astronomical price, like 4 first-round picks and 2 veterans. So that's never going to happen. But Keyonte George is untouchable. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Danny Ainge and company, Justin Zanuck, all of them, Coach Hardy, none of them want to move Keyonte George. So there you go. It was just a very interesting report that I saw come up, and I thought, well, I am going to talk about this because a couple of things. First is it's ridiculous on both sides, right? The Hawks and the Jazz talking about 2 players that probably neither side is really going to move. The Hawks are more likely to move DeJounte Murray than the Jazz are Keyonte George. But it goes into the second point of it is a local reporter for one of the teams. And like it or not, the media market in Salt Lake City is not very well regarded anywhere. That's just a fact. It's viewed as a small town media. And with reports like these, you can kind of see why. You don't really see J.A. Adonde of the LA Times making something like this and putting it out there. Not even Bill Plaschke, who I don't really like. I respect, but I don't really like his opinions. He doesn't do stuff like this. You know, Mariotti for Chicago, I believe it was Sun-Times. Like, these guys don't do this sort of thing, and then the small markets do. And I don't know why Ben Anderson felt like he needed to say that, but I don't like that he did because it doesn't benefit anybody. It's trying to make the Jazz look like they knew what Keyonte George was going to be when at that time, not quite. He wasn't quite who we saw towards the end of the season. And DeJounte Murray and the Hawks were still fighting for a playoff. They were in playoff contention at that point. So it was not a very good moment for our small network here. Or not network, but small media market. So if you read stuff like this, double check it, triple check it, see where it's coming from, consider the source. That's what I was taught in college all the time. Consider the source. And then do a little deeper dive, which is what I do, and then I report it to you. So there we go. That was the whole thing with the Jazz and Keyonte George. Very weird. Just weird all the way around. All right, so surprise topic here right in the middle of everything. ESPN released their college football top 25 post-spring, and the Utah Utes are top 10. They're number 9. And it's all predicated, tell me if you heard this before, on quarterback Cam Rising. If Cam Rising can come back healthy and come back strong, this team is headed to the college football playoff. I'm calling it right now. The defense is always solid. They have one of the best defensive coordinators in the country in Morgan Scalley. They have the most steady head coach in the country in Kyle Whittingham. And Andy Ludwig proved that he can hack it because of everything that offense went through. They still put up decent points on the board. So this team is loaded for bear. The only really scary part is the defense and the second level of the defense, which is the linebacking core. Levani Damouni was supposed to be a very big part of this as we go into next season. He's out quite possibly for the season with a lower leg injury he suffered in spring practice. So that's a big blow. Maybe they can find somebody in the transfer portal as we get closer to the season. After fall camp closes, the transfer window opens again. So we'll see what happens there. But really awesome to see the Utes actually getting respect, whereas last year they were kind of ignored. The Utes are only behind teams like Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Missouri. Missouri has been skyrocketing this offseason, and I'm not sure why. They had a strong finish, and they won 14-3 over Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, but I feel like that's a big overreaction. They did go 11-2 in the SEC West. That is true, but the SEC West is home to teams like Kentucky and Vanderbilt. So pump the brakes a little bit there, ESPN. But the Utah Utes definitely deserve to be up there. They're in front of the likes of Michigan, Florida State, Penn State, LSU, and Tennessee. So it's really awesome. They're the highest-ranked Big 12 team out there, and it seems like everyone's starting to take the Utes seriously, which is what I've been saying people should be doing since I started this podcast, really. So there we go. Big shout out to Kyle Whittingham and the University of Utah. Awesome. As a reminder, the college football season kicks off for BYU and Utah. Utah kicks off against Southern Utah on August 28th, and BYU kicks off against Southern Illinois on August 30th. So there you go. Now, speaking of BYU, let's kind of roll into the men's basketball arena here with that hire of Kevin Young is already paying dividends. So this past month, Kevin Young was very busy. He got in communication with a lot of the guys. Most of them did leave, which is to be expected when the head coach leaves. So let me remind you, spelunkers, of how college, basically athletics, works. In the past, players would sign for the school. They would. There would be loyalty to the school. They like the program. Oh, hey, this guy played there. I want to play there too because I really liked watching him and I emulate my game after him. That used to be the thing. Now you don't need that. People would have gone to Ohio State or Michigan to get more exposure. You don't need that anymore in the realm of social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, all this stuff. You don't need those big programs anymore to hype you up. You just need to have a cell phone. So now, the way it works is these players sign on for the coaches. They sign on for the system that the coach has, and they sign on for the promises that the coach made. The coach leaves, those players, the big ones, the ones that have grown under those guys, are going to follow that guy because they know what they can do. They've seen what they can do under that coach. So when guys like Ali Khalifa left, he did not go to Kentucky, or Noah Waterman, guys like that, they signed for Coach Pope. They did not sign for BYU, for the logo, or for Provo. So I want to get that out of the way first. I've seen vitriol aimed at those players, and it's very stupid. Let those guys handle it. Let those guys play their careers, man. It's okay. Your precious school, where the majority of you aren't even going or haven't gone, is going to be okay. The walls will still stand if that guy is not playing for your team. All right, I just needed to get that off my chest because it's very stupid what I'm seeing out there in social media land, on Reddit, on Instagram, just these fan pages that just attack these kids for transferring out. And even more so for Coach Pope for taking his dream job. Oh my gosh. Anyway, back to Kevin Young. He was able to keep Dallin Hall, which was humongous for this coming season. He was also able to get 2 of the top 10 recruits in BYU's history, in Brady Kozlowski and Elijah Crawford. These 2 guys will probably contribute right away, and that's very exciting. Brady Kozlowski was recruited by the likes of USC, UCLA, Arizona State, Stanford. Elijah Crawford was recruited, and he originally signed with Stanford, Kansas, Florida, and Utah. All of them wanted him. He signed with Kevin Young as well. So these 2 guys, along with Dallin Hall and a few returnees, and then there's also the return missionaries for BYU as well, this roster could come together quite quickly and very well. And there are still scholarships to work with. There's 4 scholarships open. As we get closer to the college basketball season, more and more players will find out where they are on their team's pecking order, and they'll transfer out. So there's still a lot more talent to be gobbled up by Kevin Young. So as we move along, it's turning out that this hire was a grand slam. Tony Jones of The Athletic, that's what he called it. He said this was a home run, a grand slam. It's great. It's great. That being said, if the season doesn't go as well as Mark Pope's initial season into the Big 12, chill. First season of a new coach hardly goes well for a program like BYU. I mean, my goodness, it barely goes well for a program like Michigan. So it's exciting, but let's keep it in perspective. One more note on Brady Kozlowski. He was a 2-time Utah 6A Player of the Year. That's pretty good. It's pretty good for Copper Hills. So there you go. All right, so now last thing I'm going to talk about today is video games and this weird notion that whenever there is a different game coming out for any genre, it's going to be the Call of Duty killer. It's going to be, back in the day, the Halo killer, the World of Warcraft killer, the Final Fantasy killer. Can we step away from that and just go, I hope this game is a fun and good game with no major bugs that cause it to crash and my account is safe and won't get hacked? Can we just come at games like that instead of expecting it to topple these giant games? Because newsflash, and this is something you spelunkers already know because I've said it before, the only thing that would kill those games is themselves. Look at Halo. It has killed itself. Slow to adapt to change, thinking that they knew what was going on better than their own fan base, as well as looking at the whole environment of the first-person shooter. Halo was king. It was. Halo was bigger than Call of Duty, believe it or not. Call of Duty took it over. Now Call of Duty is king. And it's being challenged, right? It's being challenged by Apex Legends. Now it's being challenged by a new game that came out called XDefiant. It's released by Ubisoft. It is free to play, but there is stuff you pay for in it. Obviously, you could pay to get along the season pass faster, to unlock weapons faster, get cosmetics for the different operators that you have. And all this past week, I was watching streamers like Dr. Disrespect, Nick Merckx, Tim the Tatman, Dr. Lupo, all of these guys who are big first-person shooter players, and their titles were always, is this the Call of Duty killer? Are we experiencing the end of Call of Duty? Now, I get it. Those guys' jobs is to get clicks, so they need to label their streams whatever will get someone to click into it. I get it. But that shouldn't be the purpose of a game being made, and it shouldn't be the purpose of people who want to play the game. People are tired of Call of Duty, just like people were tired of World of Warcraft. That's why they went to Final Fantasy XIV. And now Final Fantasy XIV is kind of the king. I mean, it's still World of Warcraft up there, but Final Fantasy XIV is still very much up there. And so Call of Duty doesn't really have that sort of challenger, that arena shooter where it was Overwatch for a time, and then Overwatch kind of collapsed in on itself, and so Call of Duty was still reigning supreme. Now XDefiant is out, and everybody wants it to be the one to knock Call of Duty off. So, I haven't played XDefiant. I'm always honest with you guys. I haven't played it. I have seen a few hours of gameplay of it, and it looks fun. It does. But I think one of the guys I watched, his name is Moist Critical or Penguin Z0 or Charlie, if you will. He said it's like candy. You know, you enjoy it for a little bit, but if you start eating it too much, you get sick. And I thought that was a very apt description of a lot of video games, if not all of them. But he said it was a mid-tier type game, and I agree with him based on everything that I saw. So there's different operators from different universes of Ubisoft games. So games like Rainbow Six, there was The Division, Far Cry, games like that. And so they took different characters from there and threw them in. Splinter Cell as well was in there. And so there are different operators that do different things. They have ultimate abilities. They have alternate abilities that they can use. So it's like a mixture of Call of Duty and Overwatch, but Overwatch is more about the different kinds of weapons that can be used, right? You have Reaper with his shotguns. You have Reinhardt with his giant hammer and his arm shield. You have Ana with the healing sniper rifle. So it's all of that. But with XDefiant, it's your standard first-person shooter, reality-adjacent weapons. AK-47s, MP5s, Barrett 50 cals, double-barrel shotguns, stuff like that. And all of the different operators use the same guns, and you don't level up the operator, you level up the weapon to get attachments and stuff like that, like Call of Duty. So, do I think this is a Call of Duty killer? No. Call of Duty will kill itself. Do I think it's better than Overwatch? Controversial take here. No, I don't. I still think Overwatch is a very solid game. They just have a lot of stuff they need to fix. XDefiant just kind of slides right in, and it has its spot. You don't like the cartooniness of Overwatch? Cool. But you don't like the over-the-top nature of Call of Duty and what it's become? Cool. You got XDefiant here now. There's a lot of games out there for you to choose from. I'm not going to tell you one way or the other. I'm not going to tell you, hey, you should play this one over that one, and if you don't, you're stupid. I'm not a gatekeeper like that. So, I will lay it out bare for you. I have not played XDefiant, but from what I've seen, it looks like it can be fun for a couple hours at a time. Not really a game that you can sit down and play for an afternoon if you have the time, but you'll still have fun if you sit down and play it for an hour or two to cool down after work. And that's what a game should be. It shouldn't be this epic experience. Not every game has to be Elden Ring. Not every game has to be Halo 3 or Halo 2. It can just be a thing where you just go and you cool off for a couple hours after work. Or you put the kids to bed, you have an hour or two before you need to go to bed too. There you go. That's what gaming should be. Not every game should be an epic game. And I don't mean epic game as in the creators of Fortnite. All right, everybody. That is the show this week. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, please do follow me on those socials at the Matt Cave Pod on X or Twitter, and the Matt Cave Podcast on YouTube and Facebook. You can find me in all three areas. And thank you for being here. Happy Memorial Day weekend, and happy rolling into summer as the kidlets are done with school. Good luck to all you parents out there. It's going to be a rough 3 months ahead. And I'll see you next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.